There's a lot that people talked about with you from Thermal, but let's get a quick season. We've only had 1.5 races because the second one didn't count. But how are we feeling? You guys have done like several tests as well. Team-wise, 3 cars, feeling good about the 3-car operation so far?
Yeah, a little bit of a difference this year with moving down to 3 cars, a little bit more of a concentrated effort, which I only see positives from. But from personal side, I think I've been driving really well. Haven't finished outside the top 5 yet in IMSA or in IndyCar this year, so
no big deal.
2 podiums, a win at Sebring,
yep.
A couple top 5s in IndyCar, but you just got to keep the ball rolling.
I love that. No, that's. I mean, honestly, the funny thing is, the sports car scene you've been absolutely slapping so far this year, so that's nice. That's always a nice little addition. Let's get right into Thermal really quick because I loved your strategy. And we've been talking about this race for far too long. It's time to move on to something else, but that's because there hasn't been another race to talk about. But because you're here and a lot of people, so many folks have decided to voice their opinions, I loved your strategy. I did. I was hoping that was going to happen. As soon as it happened, I was like, yes, that's our guy. I can't wait to see what was going on. Had you guys talked about it, would you, obviously, when you're a racing driver, your job with your team is to think about every possible strategy to win the race. This is one of them in the unique situation that it was. So what was that like to kind of hold yourself back a little bit to just know that, hey, we're saving our bullets for later in the race?
Yeah, so it didn't come up until after qualifying because obviously we had speed. I made a mess of qualified I think like 24th or 25th. So we had to start thinking outside the box. We had to get through and into the top 6 for our first heat race, which we did. We finished 6th and got through the final, starting last place. We thought, if on pure merit and pace, we might be able to get into the top 6 if we have a really good race, make some really good moves. Or we can try something that's kind of a go big or go home option. And I was thinking about it the morning of the race, and then my engineer Nathan said, I think we should do this if we make it to the final and we're last. And
I like that.
It was interesting. I thought it was harder to drive an IndyCar that slow than it was to drive at that fast. It's so hard when you have all that horsepower, all that traction, the downforce, and you don't use any of it. 15 seconds off a lap is incredibly slow. I don't think people realize like how slow you have to go or how slow it feels you're going. It feels like you're driving around at 40 miles an hour.
Yep.
So, no, it worked out. Some guys caught on to it and some of the other guys tried to do it, but obviously we had a few laps before they started to do it. So our tires were in a little bit better shape for the final. And that with how good the car was and the pace that we had already, just kind of made it so we could march through the field.
And I'll get one more in before I let Chase hop in because I know Chase has some great questions for you as well. But did you, the racing through the middle of the pack, I actually thought it was great. Would you say you were sending it a little bit more than like, let's say maybe a points race? Because I think there are some moves that you can tell as a watcher of motorsport for many years and sometimes participator, there's moves that you make that you truly, if this doesn't work, we're both crashing. And you would make that if you're trying to go for a championship at the end of the year or there is a bigger prize on the line, et cetera. Indy 500, for example, like Pato O'Ward just fired it in there and crashed it into the wall with Ericsson. Like something like that. It kind of had that vibe to it. Did you feel like, hey, I'm just going to chuck this thing in there when you're going for these moves? Did it have a bit of that vibe, do you think, with the way you were racing with some of those guys and with when you saw like Joseph and Alex kind of hitting each other a little bit too?
Yes. I did not care at all what was happening to everybody else. Yeah. Where, most of the time when you're in the car, you don't care what happens to anybody else anyways, but sometimes I can have an effect to yourself in your race.
And there's a championship, and you're probably going to be one of the guys in the championship fight, so you got to think about that.
Right, and there was none of that. So, I think every move was like that, except Armstrong. I didn't really have to extend too much. Yeah. But a lot of the other moves were very 50-50, low percentage moves.
I like that. But see, that made it, for me, entertaining to watch. Now, go ahead, Chase. Jump on in here.
Yeah, no, Colton, hello. Good to get to see you. Good to talk to you here. I like Connor knows, we've talked all about thermal, about racing, and this year I'm putting 100% focus on IndyCar, big NASCAR guy. So I'm learning all the ins and outs. I will say that you were one of the first guys that I picked up on when I first dabbled into the IndyCar scene. You had a car that kind of low key reminded me of Batman. You had a Batmobile style
like
to
that.
it, a little bit of blue. I definitely will ask you off the record how you could compare yourself to Bruce Wayne, but we'll leave that one for not the show. What I do want to talk to you about is you made some stellar moves in that last race. I think one of those moves that you made coming around, I had compared it to a kart move that I made at me and my kid race go-karts the week before, and it was pretty deep in there like that. But for you, talking about going so slow, it feels like you're going slow. I guess how would you compare that for a civilian driving the car? How fast are they going? Because if you think that is 40 miles an hour, I feel like I've just been put to shame when I'm going 80 on the freeway.
The thing about racing cars that fast is your perception of speed is extremely skewed. So when we're under caution and we're going 100 miles an hour, it feels like we're going 20 to 25 miles an hour. It feels extremely slow just because you're used to going 160 or 180 down that straight. So your perception is massively skewed. So when you have to go that slow, it feels like you're crawling, like you can't really go any slower, which of course you could. But yeah, when you sit into that car and you know what it's capable of and you know that feeling of what it's like to go 240 miles an hour in that thing, all of a sudden when you're going 100, it feels a lot different.
How do you feel headed to the grocery store on the weekend in your own car?
He's out there ripping.
It's 120 miles an hour, running grandmas off the road.
Yep. Ain't no time for the grannies, yeah.
Gotta get that more calm, bro.
Yes.